Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming again tonight. This is our second to last meeting, in case you weren't aware of that. We're at number 7 out of 8. So it's been, I really appreciate it. It's the course. You guys have all participated well. It's been neat to do this together with you. And a couple of things I wanted to just point out at the beginning as we're thinking about finishing up is I did mention that we are thinking about having a kind of a small group type Enneagram group. I mentioned that in the email I sent to you guys yesterday. And what we're kind of interested in doing is getting some people together who would like to use the Enneagram as a tool for personal and spiritual growth. And it's more of a kind of discussion and sharing. We've got a couple of books we might go through that have different exercises for each of the different types. So they're not so much things that you can do in a group like this, because there's a different exercise for every type. So, and that's one of the things you might go through. So if you're interested in that, let us know, and we can meet. If you say I'm interested but I'm not sure I want to commit, let us know that too. And we can talk about it a little bit more over the summer and such. But we're thinking about doing that starting in the fall.
Yeah, and it would be probably like twice a month. I think every week it's a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
So, but once a month is kind of too little to try to do something. Yeah. So that's what we're thinking about, twice a month, and a growing group. That's less lecture and more discussion and kind of walking this journey together through.
Sure.
And the other thing I want to mention is, if you have any questions that you'd like to see answered about the Enneagram, or at least you'd like to ask, I'm not sure that I can answer them, but you'd like maybe to discuss before we end the course, think about that for next week. You can, if you send them to me ahead of time, I could even be a little more prepared for them. But so if you have any questions that you've been thinking about, wondering about, and you'd like to get answered before before the course ends, let me know. And the third thing we wanted to mention is one of the things that Julie and I also do is an art and faith retreat called Art Vocabulary of the Soul. Joy's been to it before, and she's coming again. Yeah.
I am. Yes.
In June. June 22nd.
22nd, 24th.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there. Kind of give a plug for it for anybody's interested. You don't have to be an artist. It's we do art there. You have to like art, I suppose.
He does poetry.
Yeah.
And I do paintings.
And there's different forms of art, right? There's
Yeah.
And then, so we've had people come out and do photography, scrapbooking,
What was the
writing
sewing
letters,
thing or the knitting thing?
somebody did weaving.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we all did weaving that time too.
Yeah.
That was fun.
We did.
I thought you went to it too.
Yeah, I've also been to that one. So different kinds of painting. Some people have done acrylics and watercolor and markers. I don't remember what else people have done, but some people just take a walk.
But it's about connecting with God through art. And we have it at Kingsfold Retreat Center, which is a beautiful retreat center down by Cochrane in the Rocky Mountains. So, I think that's all I have to start out with. We're going to talk about harmonic groups today. Can you all sing harmony? I don't think I need to say anything else.
Amazing Grace. Everybody knows Amazing Grace.
I know there's the same note too.
Can you go to the next slide, Julie? Actually, I don't know why they're called harmonic groups. I pulled them out of Russ Hudson's book, and they were part of something I was shown last fall too. But I didn't find a definition for why they're called harmonic groups. But they are groups about how we cope with conflict or difficulty, or how we respond when we don't get what we want,
I like that.
which happens once in a while.
Only one at a time.
JD means
As long as you don't have April in Alberta, you might get what you want. But go ahead and read through those, and I'm going to ask you which one you think you're in. Go ahead and read through them, and then we'll talk about them in a minute. So let's talk about them a little bit. Again, this is about, they found people as they've studied different people with using Enneagram types and such, that people tend to kind of fall into some three general groups in terms of some coping strategies, how we cope with difficulties. And as it says with the positive outlook group, and I've got types there, 9, 2, and 7, but you may be one of those types, but not necessarily think that you fall into that group, or that's your kind of more dominant way of handling things. And that's fine. It doesn't always fall that way. But they do find that a lot of times it's 9, 2, and 7 kind of tend to have a more positive attitude. That's how they deal with things. And it's and one of the things that happens often is people mistype themselves because of this. One of the things Russ Hudson said in his book is people think they're 9s and they're actually 2s, or they think they're 7s. And this is one of the things that kind of throws people off sometimes, because they actually it's 2s and 7s. It's 9s who think they're 2s and 7s. I think the way it is, because the 9, 3, and 6 are kind of the central one. And so in the competency group, it's 3s who think they're 1s or 5s, but they're actually 3s. But the competency group is, they put aside their personal feelings. They strive to be objective. I'm not going to deal with myself right now. I've got a situation to handle. They expect other people to do things that way as well. I'm smiling at my wife here with this.
I might do that.
Yes. And the intensity group, intensity/reactive group. I've heard it called both things. And that's people who tend to react emotionally to difficulties. And there's a sense of, I want you to feel what I'm feeling, or at least to as much as I'm feeling. This is important, we need to get done, we need to be in. They respond with intensity, but it's also an emotional intensity that looks for an emotional response in others. So if you don't care enough about something, that can sometimes bother the people that react that way.
Why would it bother me?
So, try to pick one that you do more than others. So how many of you think that you're more the positive outlook type group? So if you had to stack them up, that would be on top?
I don't know, because positive. When I was working with people, I used all three.
Uh-huh.
Because where they're at, starting with how they're feeling, then where they are right now, then moving to where they want to have to do some work, and then where they want to be, positive. So it seemed like different steps for me.
So these are, that's for other people, but how do you yourself tend to cope? It's kind of a default.
Oh, for myself?
Yeah, for yourself.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy.
So how many think of the positive outlook group? 2 of us, okay. How many think you're the competency group? Julie, okay. And then how many think they're in an intensity reactive type group?
It depends on the situation.
It
you're
does.
in.
Yeah, that's
very
that's
Like
what I
if it's
think.
people I'm comfortable with, intensity.
Uh-huh.
If it's other people that I'm like, I know I have to work with you, then it's definitely positive.
See, I'm more like, if my initial reaction will always be intensity, and then it's like I can switch into the competency group and just get stuff done. But it's hard. It was like if I did that, I would have to do that at work sometimes. So that's what
How about you, Joy? Did you?
I'm leaning towards the competency group, but that's more in the past. I don't know where I am now.
Huh.
Emotional? I don't know. That's too much work. I deal with emotional people,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And I have a hard time being around their emotion and their drama. It just sucks the life out of me, right?
Uh-huh.
Not that I don't have emotions, but,
Other people can be very life-sucking.
yeah. I don't know.
Well,
I had somebody, a professor, refer to me as a Pollyanna. That's somebody who's overly positive.
yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know how a person can be overly positive, right? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I like Pollyanna.
Yeah.
She was me too.
It was a good movie.
Yeah. But it's yeah.
It's a bad rap.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I'd like us to kind of break up into the different groups.
I get to be my own group.
You get to be your own group. So,
Well, I can be in your group because when I was raising my kids and stuff, that's, my feelings didn't matter. You don't matter. You focus on someone else, and yeah. So I can see that being in that for sure.
okay, so you three intensity groups can get together. That's positive outlook, folks. We'll get together. And I've got a couple questions. So these are 2 questions I'd like you to address in your groups.
Do you have a slide for it?
No, I don't have a slide. So you can write down the questions. Sorry. The first question is, why is this a good or effective, or how does this method work well? Tell us something good about the method, or the coping method. And the other question is, which of the other 2 groups annoys you the most? So let's see where we ended up. How about the competency group, since you're so competent?
They were finished real quick.
Oh, they
They're
were.
efficient too.
So why is competency a good way for coping with difficulty?
Well, you can, when a crisis happens, you can get things done and you can put aside your feelings so you can do it in a calm way and kind of makes everything calm around you.
Uh-huh.
Or can-
Yeah, but who needs a crisis? Like, is that the only time confident people are good when there's a crisis?
Good question.
No, because they're always getting things done.
But this was particularly
Yeah,
about
we're talking about-
conflicts and coping in
Conflict.
conflicts and
Yeah,
difficulty
conflict.
situations, right?
Yeah.
So,
Difficult situations.
So which of the other 2 groups annoys you the most?
probably the intensity and reactive group.
That's me.
Okay.
As I said before, they suck the energy out of me when they get into their drama.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I mean, they can be a lot of fun, right?
Mhm.
But when they're upset,
Everybody knows.
Everybody.
yeah, everyone knows, and it goes on and on and on.
Not always.
I'm not thinking of you.
How do you know?
Just a continuing.
I may be reacting.
Don't we have a lot to that?
There's a 4 in here somewhere.
So speaking of the intensity group,
I noticed something. I often do react this way,
which
but
one?
it's,
The third one?
but if it's more like personal stuff or whatever. But I have noticed in the moment of a real crisis, like someone else, or like when I was homeless or something like really major,
Mhm.
I don't melt down. I react competently.
Right. Well, I think we all do each of the 3 of these, and we all, if we stick with the Enneagram types, and we can all move to different types as well. So we are all connected to types that do the other 2.
But why couldn't I do that more often with my personal life?
Well, it's
personal. It's hard to separate
Good
yourself.
question. Good answer.
And one of the reasons for bringing these to light is to help us understand that there are different ways of doing things, and that we do tend to fall into one way more than another way. Because once we can put a name to it, then we can say, you know, I could make another choice at this point in time. And so even just seeing how we react similar to other people and how we react different to other people gives us more options.
Yeah.
So what did you guys come up with? What's good about the reactive intensity group?
Well, we acknowledge our feelings and work through our feelings because they force us to. They don't really let us
At
not.
least you know how you're feeling.
At least you know how you're feeling. So that makes you more healthy. Theoretically, if you know what your feelings are.
Good.
But
Thanks very
that
much.
There's more than
that
one
could
way to
be.
express feelings though. You don't have to.
Yes.
A con could be.
For some Some people
be what
have to
affect other people.
in order to express it.
Negatively.
Maybe just not around people.
How do
I
you
mean, I
know
have received
whether
that
you've dealt with it with
in my
crisis?
life.
Well, if we look at this, just because people are expressing emotions, doesn't mean they're not getting things done.
Yeah.
And what they are doing is they're getting things done with a sense of intensity about it, or they're reacting with a sense of intensity. And sometimes things need a sense of intensity.
It's called passion.
Yeah, passion. So which of the other two groups annoyed you slightly more than the other group?
Positive people.
Yes. Yes, sorry.
Are you positive?
No, because only fools are positive.
Oh, okay.
Oh, jeez. Wow. Just insulted someone.
Well, she's just been insulted a couple times.
Oh.
Were there any other reasons for having annoyed positive people?
Oh, I was gonna say other annoyances. For me, it was, I felt like depending on the issue, like the conflict, for me, if it was sort of maybe a social justice type of issue or conflict, then the competency group would probably bother me because I'd be like, I need to know that you care about this in order to make a good decision about which way we need to go. So I felt like in certain situations the competency group might bother me. But I know I can also be in that group in certain situations, so.
Okay. So for us, what was good about the positive outlook?
It's a good place to start,
It's a good place to start.
and it sets the mood for the rest of the tone, for the rest of the conflict.
Yeah, when I thought of, with a positive outlook, rather than focusing on the negative, you can see solutions and rather than seeing problems. And we all complain all the time. It's nice to be more positive sometimes and work towards solutions rather than just, again, the issues.
That's right, it's a choice, right?
So
We
joy is
all
right?
have good and bad things happen,
Choice.
Oh, yeah.
so we can choose to think about the good things over the rotten things, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, it's true.
So which were we most
Whatever
annoyed
things
with?
are true, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are a good report, think on these things.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
That's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
That's in the Bible somewhere, right?
Which one annoys us the most?
Yeah, which one annoys them?
Take that one.
The competency group. Because, because I probably find myself in the reactive group quite a bit as well. But I tend to think that just because shoving down your emotions doesn't make you more competent.
Doesn't mean that you're
No,
shutting
because then
them
you
down.
explode.
Yeah.
you're putting them on the back burner, you'll deal with them in some other fashion,
Or it'll explode.
or really,
Well, but part of the point is, and I appreciate you saying that, but we look at it differently.
yeah.
And, you know, it looks to me, it feels to me, maybe, like putting it on the back burner is shoving them down.
For the
Because
time being, yeah.
Yeah, for
You
the time
Put
being.
it on the shelf and then you deal with this stuff. Yeah.
Unless you don't deal with
And
it, you
then
can
you
just keep
close
putting it on
it.
the back burner.
Well, you could
and you know,
work it out some other way.
yeah, well, we've had different experiences with it. And it's hard for me to put something, to put the emotions on the back burner. Because I feel like I go back to the back burner with them. Because
It's really, that's part of who you are, so
yeah,
how can you make a good decision when you're turned off?
Or
that's,
steamed up,
what's that?
or steamed up.
Or steamed up.
Like,
Yeah,
there's
it's
gotta be
impulse.
some sort of happy medium in there and make a good decision or whatever when you need to do it
Well, and
in a crisis or whatever.
well, I think you're right. And each of these can be good or taken to more of an extreme. And there are pros and cons to each of them. And it's good to just know the different ways of dealing with it. So then we can see when we're going to extremes as well.
Without the competency group or know-it-alls?
No, they're just doers.
Just the doers.
They just get things done and then deal with their feelings.
Unless they're a 5 and then they might be in another law.
Yeah.
That's true. Or they just have no feelings
Yeah.
because they can't access them at all.
Okay.
Well, I'm thinking of civil rights movement and the intensity
Mhm.
and reactive action is what was needed. You know, for the whole thing, it was the emotion and the things that were, let the dogs go on those crowds and they were opposing people. And it was intense. It was reactive. So and that's what was part of the linchpin that started and kept the civil rights movement going.
But there was also, you know, if you think about civil disobedience almost seems to be the competency group. Because there's a sense of putting your emotions on the back burner, or not.
They weren't reacting, they were just
Yeah.
doing like they would just sit on the bus.
Yeah,
And they weren't pushing their way or whatever.
they were responding, maybe.
They were thinking of the greater good rather than themselves.
Right. So probably, if we were to look at the movement, I think we would probably see all three different reactions
Yes.
at different points.
Well, and the competency would that reflect Matt Martin Luther King's theological basis?
Oh, probably two. He was extremely competent. So, let's move on. We're talking about growth this week. These last 2 weeks, we're kind of, the last key is directions for growth. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with growth was vulnerability. And Lindsay pointed me to a very good TED Talk a few weeks ago. I was in one of the emails. I put a link to it. It was about vulnerability. And one of the things that the lady who was giving this TED Talk said is that vulnerability is a cradle for soil for growth. So I'd like you to, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I'd like you to write down, and these aren't some things that we'll necessarily share, but write down or think about what makes you feel vulnerable. When do you feel vulnerable? So as you think about that, what do you think about the second statement? What do you think about the idea that vulnerability is the cradle for growth? How does that feel? Do you think that can,
It can be if you choose to try to learn something from it.
okay,
Yeah, if you want to,
if you want to?
if you choose to.
I think it's up to each person.
Well, I think what she was talking about in this TED Talk was that we need to choose vulnerability. You know, and it's not something we normally choose, but to choose vulnerability in some ways. You know, certainly there's a lot of places where we don't want to be vulnerable, where we're in danger of getting hurt, and those type of things, where we wouldn't tell anybody to, you know, if you've been hurt by somebody, don't go be vulnerable to them again. But
No.
No.
but you know, what she was saying again in this TED Talk, and was this idea that we would choose to put ourselves in places where we feel more, we can still be safe, but we feel more of the vulnerability.
I mean, on purpose.
Yeah, on purpose.
And that is so we experience growth.
Well, we can begin to, it's one way of getting us out of our patterns. You know, because part of our patterns are to avoid these places where we're vulnerable. And part of getting us out of those patterns is to choose some of those places. Again, you have to be careful. It's not, don't just do dangerous things because they're dangerous.
No.
Yeah, well, or even psychologically dangerous things.
Yeah.
You know, it's
So if you're scared of heights, you don't go skydiving.
No, we don't have to go that extreme.
no.
Have to buy it.
What is the point of that anyway?
I don't know. It's
I
like
did
what?
it. It was amazing.
adrenaline.
Well, good for you.
It's not my,
I'm glad you could enjoy it.
I was freaked out. I did it because my sister wanted me to. I feel like the way that second statement makes sense to me is it's when you notice where you're vulnerable that you can allow healing to happen in that place. So you can only really experience healing when you kind of really experience where you're broken or vulnerable.
Yeah.
Same with what they talk about for grief, like you can't really get over grief until you actually move through it. So you like vulnerability points out where you actually need to become stronger, but also that to recognize you're still human, like you're not, this isn't something you have to hide, you're still accepted and a human being if you express your vulnerability.
It's a place that we, in order to, oftentimes vulnerability and hurt go together. And in order for the healing of the hurt, oftentimes you have to go through the place of vulnerability to allow yourself to experience some of that vulnerability for the healing to take place. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then I think it's only through naming those places that you could build up strength around it or be more confident about those spaces, because if you always avoid it, then you never know that you actually can handle it.
And with that, if we always avoid something, we are to some extent avoiding part of ourselves. And that's another reason to, what a lot of what the Enneagram teaches is about fullness. It's experiencing all of ourselves. And we need to go to those places where we're not as strong, and maybe where we'll never be as strong. It's not like we're going to make a vocation out of them,
Right.
but we need to be able to, part of growth is taking steps in some of those directions.
Well, when you talked about the ruler who came to Jesus, the rich guy, and he was saying that didn't Jesus kind of point to his vulnerability and said, Yeah, but you're filthy rich, you're,
Is
is that a vulnerability for him?
well, as you're explaining it, I think I would understand it, that this is a place where he feels vulnerable. He's, to continue with that thought, he can be good and do all these things as long as he's got his riches around him. He feels safe with his riches around him. He feels more vulnerable without the riches. And he's hanging on to them. I mean, we could interpret it in different ways, but that's one way to interpret it.
I like that one.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that could go anything, like, what hang on to, richest time,
Right.
popularity, whatever.
Okay. So we'll keep that in mind as we look at the types for growing. Let's take a break right now. Now I'm starting each type with a resourceful state. And I hesitate to do that because when we say state, or we hear the word state, we tend to think of static. And we tend to think of a destination. This is where we have to get to. This is what we want to, this is what fives would like to be, or this is what fives should be able to get to. And it's not really that. The Enneagram isn't about getting to a specific destination. It's about noticing the processes within us and allowing God to work within us. It's allowing, relaxing some of the ways we work and allowing God to work within us, and not trying to force a state or get to a state or hold a state. It's really, because the Enneagram's a lot about change. God is the only thing that stays the same, and we are always in a flux of changing. And so, I don't mean to say that this is kind of a goal to get to, but it is something to, as I talk about the different states for the different types, it's something to notice in yourself when you experience these things. And we all, when we go up and down during the day, we have moods, we're at different places, and sometimes we're more into our patterns and sometimes we're not. But this is where, some good things for fives to experience, they're kind of in a more healthy state. This is where they're at. And so it's a sense of competence, sense of, I can do things. And fives, they have a tendency to isolate themselves, to intellectualize things, to stay in their heads. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but a lot of people use it. And that's where fives tend to stay. They're observers. And so a good direction for fives is to move out of their head some. Move from the head into the body, can engage, interact. And they also tend to hoard. Avarice is their passion. And so they'll hoard what they need. They don't need a lot, but what they need, they will hang on to. And there's a sense of not doing that so much, negotiating, letting things go. And also, that I have a right to exist and stand out. I've got a right to be part of this world, to engage, just like everybody else does. I don't have to just think about things. You know what? What's his name? Descartes. Descartes is someone who said, "I think, therefore I am." And basically, he went into a closet, and he had to think himself out of the closet. And that's what fives tend to do. They just want to. I just want to think about the whole world, and then I'll figure it out. But to act as well, to engage, is a good thing for fives. So let's look at the 5 vulnerabilities. And again, being vulnerable is a cradle for growth. This is what fives avoid. This is what fives don't want to experience. And if you think about, back at the beginning, I talked about supportive and unsupportive environments. And for fives, this is what unsupportive looks like. When things start like this start happening, they want to start running away. They want to start reacting. So, being invaded, taken over, being emptied, they have a fear of being empty, of not having enough of themselves, and so they tend to hoard themselves. When you ask a five to do something with you, they tend to want to know how much it's going to cost. How much will this take of me? And So as you look at that list over there, what are some, back to our conversation about vulnerability, what are some safe ways that fives could be vulnerable and engage in some of those things? What do you think?
Being visible with friends.
Being visible with
trust.
friends? Good. That's sort of, doing some more things with friends you trust.
Yeah.
Any other ideas?
Try something new.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Go to a pottery class or something, whatever some type of course may be, where you're not the competent one, and you can try some different things. Again, it's not your life, but you can learn some more about yourself by trying some of those vulnerable areas. So, kind of.
I think that it would be good for them to try something that isn't just in the head.
That's true. Okay. Sports, those type of things can be good
Yeah.
sometimes.
Art.
Yes. Well, there's a retreat though. If you learning about it.
Every time we go through these types, I think, hey, yeah, that's me. But I'm every type, like, yeah, that's me. I
We're,
can't
It
we're
is
all
similar.
every type though, but we are
So
more one
indecisive.
than the other.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And we do tend to have a dominant type direction. And my brother was a 5, and I can see a lot of 5 in me. But I tend to approach the 5 with a 2 bent.
Whatever it means, I don't know what that would mean.
Well, I mean, some of my motivations, for one of the things that 5s do is they compartmentalize. They say, this is my home life, this is my work life, and I don't want the two to meet, And that's
Read my mail again.
well, that's how they can budget themselves. And when I say
That's
themselves,
what I mean, you can put stuff on the shelf, remember?
yeah, okay. Well, it's but I find that I tend to compartmentalize too. But it's more of I'm trying to present a certain person to this group of people, and a certain personality at work and a certain personality at home, as I try to meet different needs and those type of things. And so that's why I say it's kind of like a 5 with a 2 bent. It's more like a 2 motivation.
Yeah, I can see that, I can relate.
Okay. So let's go to the next one. This is something we talked about a few weeks ago, but I wanted to bring it back because, again, these are directions for growth. So moving to the high sides of the arrow types. The 5 is connected by arrows to type 7 and 8. And 5s tend to move to 7 in stress, in unsupportive environments. And instead of going down, which we often do in stress, we often are less resourceful. But 5s can, when recognized in stress, and they can take on some better parts of the 7. 5s can use humor to engage with others, be more spontaneous, try some new things, just like we're talking about. A lot of these things come back to the same type of things for each of the different types. And moving to 8 in security, get in touch with their sense of power. Engage and not just observe. They can assert themselves and help others. That make sense?
Yeah. So they get out of their head.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of thinking about it, they do it.
Right. And it's not like 5s are going to stop being 5s. They're not going to stop being intellectual or stop observing the world. And they are going to still have the ability to synthesize and those type of things. But it doesn't have to be the only thing they are. We are more than our strengths. So, going to the next thing. In the Enneagram teaching, I don't know if you, again, remember this from the very first session. We talked about where the head and the heart go, the head center and the heart center, where they go in terms of kind of our patterns. The head center has a fixation. the heart center has a passion. Well, on the higher side of the head center, and the higher side of that heart center, as are described, there's also another way for them to go. And that's what they're called, these things are called is a holy idea and the virtue. So we have the fixation versus a holy idea, and the passion, place of suffering, versus the virtue. So these are directions that each of the different types can go when you're doing a lot of work with the Enneagram, when you're doing a lot of work with yourself, really, and observing yourself and becoming aware of yourself. And a lot of times there's some type of meditation that needs to be involved with this as well, whether it be centering prayer or other types of journaling, that ways that you can let go of the world, let go of how much attached we are to things, and begin to focus. This sense of focusing more on God, without having to have ourselves invested in doing this or in doing that, just being. And the way we tend to live our lives, the way everybody tends to live their lives, is a sense like I wrap myself up in the stuff that I do, or how I react to things, and the patterns. And the way to get out of those, we have to kind of develop new patterns, a sense of being able to let go of how much the world has a hold of us. And the different types of meditation are ways of just letting go of that, helping our mind and our heart and our body be able to let go of some of those things, so we can have more connection with the divine. So that's part of what's involved with these whole ideas and virtues. But I wanted to go through them. So they're not as, I understand, I'll just go there. They are things that take a while to work into our lives. But for fives, the holy idea is transparency. I am unique and different, but not separate from God and the world. Fives tend to plot themselves off and say, I'm one thing, the world is another. So I can isolate myself, and what I do doesn't matter to the world. So, my own life and my full experience are part of God's unfolding work and will. So letting people see me, that's where the transparency comes from. Engaging is the path to wisdom. Being known is as essential as knowing. And again, the fives, their essence, kind of where they come from, is a sense of wisdom. But they can get caught in the sense of wisdom only equals intellectual knowledge. And again, this holy idea is much like some of the other things we've been talking about with fives, is that I need to engage as well. I cannot just observe. And so this is kind of a background for that, way of thinking for that. And I wrote down a Bible verse here because I think, I believe that we can find each one of these different things and different ways we look at things in the Bible. 1 Corinthians 12 talks about the body of Christ. The foot's, just because it's a foot doesn't mean it's not part of the body. And just like a five, just because it's a five doesn't mean they're not part of the rest of things. They are not separate. There's a sense of being different. Foot is different than a hand and so on, but also connected, also part of something bigger.
So this is, if a 5 is in your fifth place, this would ideally be what their head would be thinking?
Yeah, it's a way of conceptualizing out of the fixation. I don't have the fixation of the 5 right here in front of me, but their fixation tends to push them towards isolating, towards not engaging. And we need to have a new lens, a new way of looking at things that allows for different action. And the virtue that goes with that is, again, some of these words we've heard before. I can negotiate what I need and let the rest go. I don't have to just hoard and hold on to things. And I can share my inner life to enrich the world. The word that I put in the circle here is detachment. And detachment is different than non-attachment. And perhaps you don't know what either one of those means. I don't know if I would if I didn't study it. But detachment is a sense of, it's just letting go, of not letting things have such a hold on me.
And that's because Aris was the one that went through
Yeah.
that, right?
Right.
Which is the holding on to things.
Right. And non-attachment is kind of, I'll be separate from the world. I'll go away from the world.
Oh, I see.
But detachment is still in the sense of engaging, but it's not, it's, letting go. The open hand. Oftentimes we approach life with a sense of a closed fist, theoretically, that I want to hang on to these things that are important to me rather than an open hand, that I'm willing to take what God gives me. And as we, these are, again, places that as we practice self-awareness, as we learn to see ourselves in our patterns, as we stop judging ourselves and, accept ourselves, and, we can begin to move in these directions. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, let's move on to type 6. So type 6 tends to be fearful. And so I put this image up there. The bird sitting on a tree is not afraid of the branch breaking because her trust is not in the branch but in her own wings. And the 5s need to learn to trust, the 6s need to learn to trust in themselves. And so it's, again, a resourceful state of some things to watch for themselves is the sense of trusting inside themselves. And, not thinking the world is against me, not living in this state of fear. It's really that the states are, when we're static, it's probably not in a good place. We tend to get frozen in, 6s are fear, 5s is isolation, and so on. But, again, 6s and 5s are both part of the head center, so they can tend to get in their head. So 6s need to be proactive, move into action as well. Have a sense of confidence and courage versus I worry, therefore I am. That's what 6s can be. I see the world in a certain, I'm comfortable, even though I don't like it, I'm used to the sense of worrying about things. If I'm comfortable when I have something to worry about. So the vulnerabilities for 6 are being betrayed or betraying others. This is where they don't want to be. This is what an unsupportive situation looks like for them. Being caught off guard. Inconsistency, ambiguity. Being thrown out due to disobedience. I pause there because when the word inconsistency, I have a situation at work where there's a contractor I'm working with who never meets his deadlines. He's inconsistent, and I can just resonate with this sense that I really don't like that. I want to be, people are counting on me, and I want to be able to count on him. In any case, continuing on, being thrown out is this whole sense of being found in deviance or disobedience. So how could, again, the question, what would be some ways for the 6 to explore their vulnerabilities, which again, don't make them unsafe?
Well, they could get involved in like social justice issues without breaking the law, but still being out there and like, let's say you go out and help the homeless, they will betray you sometimes, but they may learn to deal with that. But that doesn't mean they have to start a riot about
Okay, so, which
Because
is,
it does look like that is like a big thing to them. Or, I don't know, how can one learn to, I don't know how can they learn to realize that's a part of life? That you're sometimes betrayed, or people are caught off guard or inconsistency. That's what I'm trying to get at.
well, I can see what you're talking about, this sense of, again, I work at Hope Mission. I see lots of people that deal with addicts, and when you deal with people who are drug addicts or alcoholics and that type of stuff, they do tend to betray it in some ways. I live in an, I
Not
don't live.
deliberately, that's just how they are.
Right, it's just how they are. But it can feel like betrayal. I work in an apartment house where people relapse.
Yes.
And they relapse, and I don't deal with them directly, but people who work close to me do. And I think about that situation where they have learned, the people who worked with them, learn to recognize that just because there's some betrayal there, it doesn't mean that the person's all bad.
Or that it's personal.
Right, or that it's personal. So you're right, I can see what you're saying, that this might be for a 6 to go and work with people who are addicts or of some sort, that it might be a good way for them to grow.
Because they would learn to see that's part of the human existence, especially for these other people who are very vulnerable,
Right.
much more than they are. To see, and they wouldn't be doing anything illegal. I mean, it's not like they're buying booze for them.
Right, yeah.
I mean, they're not going down the streets lying down and if you don't help these people, I'm gonna just protest. But it would be like a step. The people might get out of their fear to see that there's people living in that kind of situation are just always in a state of fear, I think. And maybe that's why one of the reasons they do that, they have they have no stability in their life.
Yes,
Hard.
it's a way to escape.
So that's my idea. I don't know what other people think.
Any other thoughts?
Or they could do the homeless camp, like I mean, that's pretty safe.
Yeah, it is safe. I put Martin Luther King Jr. here. I think it's him. Yeah.
Says so.
Yeah, but it's real small on my piece of paper. Okay.
That is actually something probably
Yeah.
most likely said.
And 6s would not, civil disobedience would not be a place that 6s wanted to go because it's disobedience. But it's, in the right situation, if they had the right cause, they felt strongly about it, it could be a place for them to go with others. And again, where they feel vulnerable, but also where they can be with others and have a sense of safety.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it alone.
Right. So again, you get the idea of looking at our vulnerabilities and how we can explore those. Doesn't mean we're going to stop feeling vulnerable, but we can explore those vulnerabilities. And sometimes we won't feel as vulnerable if we explore where the hurt is down there. Because oftentimes our vulnerabilities are, like I mentioned before, they come from hurts. So we have to let ourselves go to those places in a safe way to explore those hurts, to receive some healing.
Would a 6 feel like they are letting people down? Is that part of the betrayal?
So I think they could. As I think about the idea of letting people down, it's betrayal. It feels like you're betraying somebody. I think as a 2, I think about letting people down. Again, a 2 motivation is I'm not pleasing them. But the 6 motivation, where there's more of focus on loyalty. You know, when you're letting people down, it feels like betrayal.
So if 6 would be scared of, like, the being thrown out due to disobedience, is that about, like, just disobedience to anything? Or that, like, they're actually being disobedient?
Well, I'm sure anybody's gonna emphasize some rules more than other rules.
Right.
And some rules are gonna be more important than to other rules. Again, it's important to remember there's a phobic 6 and a counterphobic 6. And the counterphobic 6 is still operating around the fear, but they tend to run toward the fear. Doesn't mean they're going to always disobey, but their actions may look different quite a bit than the phobic 6, which is running away from the fear. But I think your question was what?
Well, I guess it wasn't, I'm just trying to figure out 6s a bit, because, like, you might maybe be a 6, but you're kind of following your own rules in terms of who and what you're loyal to. So it might not just be disobedience to, like, the traffic laws or something.
Right.
Like, you might be like, well, that doesn't matter, but I'm really loyal to the environment and this climate change march or something, which might look like some sort of civil disobedience, but you're still a 6 because you're following your own moral laws.
Well,
That's kind of my question, like, would that still be a 6?
Well, 6s tended to get support from an authority. So following your own moral laws is not so much getting support from an outside authority.
Okay.
So authority like a church or an organization you work for, or the authorities which have a lot of influence around your life. So it might be a family as well, but it's they tend to get support from external authorities, and looking for that sense of support from external authorities, because they tend to not trust themselves. Okay, let's move on. So moving to the high side of the arrow types. 6s are connected by arrows to 9s and 3s. And so they tend to move to 3 in stress. And sometimes that can just be busyness, in a way distracting themselves, continuing in the fear. But moving to the higher side of 3, they can connect with their own competence and be proactive and productive. And they can, again, we talked about this a little bit with the coping. One of the good things about the competence group is they focus on doing rather than what can go wrong. They move towards getting things done. And that's a good direction for 6s to go, rather than let the fear control them and bring them to inaction. In a similar way, 6s moving to 9, in security and more supportive environments, 6s can connect with a sense of inner trust and inner peace. And 9s have this sense of peace, connection with the world, of not just they see where we can come together, and 6s can see that within themselves. Then this last point about seeing truth on all sides, again, that's something that 9s tend to do, whereas 6s can get stuck in the dogmatic sides of things, where they're dogmatic about a certain issue, and this is the right way and that's the wrong way, and so on. Moving to 9s can help them. Any questions? Thoughts? Getting a better sense of 6s?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's look at the last part of it. So the loyal person. So we're kind of coming back to the essence, to our essence in these ideas, holy idea, and the virtue. And one of the things I guess it'd be important to point out, these are called holy ideas, but it's not so much holy in the same way that we tend to consider holy from a Christian background. It's more of a spiritual idea rather than a sacred idea, because sacred is kind of how we tend to see holy as in the Christian background. So if you study these a little more and say, that seems a little different than what I used to with the idea of holy, that's probably where it comes from. So the holy idea for sixes is faith. If you if you go around the three center points of each of the triads, so that's 6, 3, and 9, the holy idea for each of those, for sixes it's faith, for nines it's love, and for threes it's hope. So faith, hope, and love, which you may recognize from 1 Corinthians 13.
Mm-hmm. But the greatest of those is love.
Right. Which is type 9. But faith, so faith in the sense that the universe is on my side, out to do me good, not to do me in. God created things and He said they were good. This is a good place that we live. And I can trust my inner authority and others' true selves. I'm made in the good and loving image of God, so there's again that trust within me. I can trust what God has put in me. And I can't be disconnected from that image. That is always with me. It's not like God made me in His image and then I did something else. It's, that image is with me. And likewise with as Christians, there's a sense of receiving Christ's Spirit within us. We can trust that Spirit within us. It's God desires for us to be able to trust ourselves. That doesn't mean we put ourselves above everything, but it also means that there's a sense of trusting ourselves as part of liking ourselves, receiving ourselves. So what do you think about that holy idea?
I think it's good.
What about people that who experience a world that's out to do them in?
I think it's sad.
It is sad. But how does this holy idea apply to them? Does it just not fit with their world? Most of us live fairly safe lives. We're going to go home tonight and have a safe place to sleep and such, and we'll get up tomorrow. Nobody's going to try to shoot us or anything, probably. So it's we can certainly suffer. We certainly feel lots of oppression at different times, but in general, we can see that the world is not out to do us in. We live in a country with just laws to a large extent, and we can expect the protection of the law, those type of things. How does this work for people who don't have that experience? Can there still be truth to it?
I think if they try, they can achieve some of it. Become less distrustful of the world, but they need certain things to happen. Like if you're I think it would be a lot harder to get to that state if you're living in a very world that really is very chaotic and not.
That's a good way to put it.
So you would have to really rely on your inner resources and doing all that work. But you also have to know, realistically, you have to protect yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be a realist. You can't just meditate in the middle of a guerrilla war field. Facetious, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, we get the point. I mean, yes.
Well, it would be harder, but it might help them deal with their realistic, maybe, view of seeing the world that way.
The Christian training or whatever is to put your trust in God and not in the people. Because people do let you down and realize that they're not perfect either. But put your trust in Him.
Where is that?
In the Bible,
Oh,
where He says to we're not to trust in people,
Trusting the Lord is strengthening, not your own strength.
That's right.
So no, just unconditional trust for everyone.
That's, and one of the things with this, and feel free to add more comments if you have them, is that just because there's evil in the world, it doesn't cancel out the good. You know, and sometimes it's very hard to see that, and you don't want to minimize anybody's experience. But there is an underlying goodness. You know, that the evil, as we can say in different ways, the evil doesn't win. Evil can destroy and corrupt oftentimes, but there's always a sense of God and His goodness not very far away. We do have to protect ourselves, like you say, and fight back different times, but you know, part of each of these things are kind of directions toward grace. It's recognizing that it's God who holds me. I don't have to hold myself, or I don't have to rely on these structures outside of me to hold me.
Well, isn't that I can trust in my inner authority?
Yeah.
That's-
Seems like a good, like the holy idea, seems like a good meditation,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
something to meditate on like every day.
Mhm.
Yeah. Very good. And so the virtue that goes with this is courage. That's what the lion needed in the Wizard of Oz. It's
Yeah.
courage. Strength comes from being in harmony with my inner self and the objective laws of the universe. And one of the objective laws of the universe is that God has created things good. He said it was
Sorry,
very
what
good.
did you say? God is,
So that God has created things and He said they were very good. You know, at the end when He finished all of His creation, He looked at it all and said it was very good. You know, it's the laws. One of the laws of the way things work that God has created is that there is a goodness and a love that we can find. You know, we can be blind to it a lot, but but it's there underneath things for us to find. And the sense of, you know, in that, trusting in that, having faith in that, and my own connection to it. You know, having faith in God and my own connection to God, I can trust myself and be responsible for myself. The verse I have here is from Joshua 24:15. He says, "As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord." There you go. Thank you. But you know, choose this day whom you will serve. You know, you can serve other gods, that type of stuff. This is the way I'm going to trust in myself and my God. So that sense of courage. So, let's move on to type 7. Okay. Type 7s. 7s can be distracted. They can be humorous, pull in different directions, have lots of ideas going off different places. So a resourceful state for 7 is not to have ideas, but be able to focus and channel those ideas, and not just doing what feels good, you know, doing the right thing sometimes. And this last comment says, "I'll be happy when I get here," versus when I get there.
what do you mean by that?
It's finding happiness in the here and now. 7s can tend to have a lot of plans out there, a lot of options. You know, if I don't like this, I'll try that. If I don't like this, I'll try that. And so they tend to live a little bit in the future. All of the head types tend to live a little bit in the future, or that can be a tendency for them. So it's and that's the way 6s do it.
Sevens.
What's that? 7s. Thank you. Okay, so go ahead and go on to the next one. So 7 vulnerabilities. They don't like to be limited, tied down, trapped in pain and suffering. They don't want to have to deal with suffering or pain. They don't want to be boring.
Bored.
No, bored and boring. You know, they don't want people to think that they're boring. They want to add spice. They want to add variety to life. They're the people who, and so if somebody says they're boring, well, that's an offense to a 7. Or it's something that they don't want to be.
Isn't it an offense to everyone?
I don't know, some people don't mind being boring.
Well, it depends how you define boring.
Yeah.
That's right, they'd rather be boring than live a dangerous life, what they perceive as
Yeah.
dangerous.
Some people would rather be cautious, which seems boring to other people.
Or safe.
Or,
Safe.
or not so emotional, which seems boring to other people.
That's very true.
Yeah.
No emotions is very boring.
There you go.
Could be, yeah.
So how can a 7, again the question, how can they explore their vulnerabilities, move into some of these spaces, yet not be unsafe?
How can they,
I feel like we should have Tuppy answer this.
Okay,
Well,
you're being put on the spot, Tuppy.
well,
How can you move into your vulnerabilities? So,
yeah,
my vulnerabilities, I think first realize that you're in your 7 cycle.
okay.
Um, taking the time to do one step at a time. Pick what direction you want to go in.
Mhm.
It's okay to put the other ones on hold and concentrate on this one. Priorities.
Okay.
Figuring out, sometimes I think a lot of the ideas for 7s are a way of avoiding the real issue, the thing that has to get done.
Right.
You'd rather put activity, put energy and everything else into other things rather than, I guess, picking up the cross and focusing on the thing, some of the things that you're being asked to do by other people. Okay?
So that's what the things you're being asked to do by other people tend to be where you can get distracted? Is that what you're saying? Or-
No, they can be right, but
Oh,
you
they
don't,
can,
but
okay.
you don't want to.
You don't-
you don't wanna do it.
You don't want to do it, you know, so, because a 7's activity can be, what's the word?
Death?
No, it can be frustrating for other people.
The 7 activities or?
In it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe learn to slow down.
Yeah, slow down and you know, some of what Tuppy said is this idea of focusing
Yeah,
and focusing on the things that need to be done rather than the things that are fun or
Yeah, and finding joy in the mundane and realizing and acknowledging when you're taking steps, concrete steps rather than dreams. That helps.
yeah, it's all good. What I have up here in the image is kind of a counseling session. And that's, you know, for a lot of 7s, you know, why would I ever want to go to counseling? You know, you're just dealing with pain. Who wants to dredge up the pain again and again? So that can be something that, again, is a place that 7s could go to explore some of their vulnerabilities and some of their hurts.
Spiritual direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're being vulnerable.
Yes,
That's good.
it's true.
So, can you go to the next slide there, Julie? For 7s, the arrows are, they go to 1 and 5. They move to 1 in stress, and that's unsupportive environments. So 7s can become more, you know, they tend to can become judgment. 7's going to 1, if they're going to kind of the less resourceful side of 1, they can tend to become more judgmental. But if this focuses on going to the more resourceful side of 1, which is more disciplined and focused, oriented in the present rather than in the future, and a lot of things that the topic was just talking about. This sense of focusing on what needs to be done now and doing the right thing, not just the fun thing. You know, what other people are telling you to do can be the right thing. And moving to 5, again, this is where 7s tend to go in sense of security and safety. They can channel their imaginations. Some of it's the same thing. It's a focusing, but a different way of focusing. They can channel their imaginations rather than going in so many directions. Slow down and understand rather than quickly tasting and going on. And that's what 5s do. 5s do tend to drill down and focus, and they can see how things work together as well. So as you move to these different types, you can use them to help you and be a better 7. That make sense? Okay, let's look at the holy ideas for 7. And it's again some of the same type of stuff, but phrased a little bit differently and put into a framework that, as Lindsay said, might be good to meditate on, but also to see ourselves coming to that realization. So the holy idea for 7 is holy work. Sense of working rather than just planning. The reality unfolds through action in the present. And that's what 7s can tend to look at the future and what's going to happen and think that's where the most important thing is, that I have the right plans, right? I've got options and that type of stuff. They're looking ahead rather than focusing on the here and now and letting God take care of the plans. You know, if my mind's always out there thinking about these type of things and what I can do, I'm not trusting in that future to God. And I put down Joseph here. You know, Joseph may have had his own plans. If you're familiar with the story of Joseph from the Bible, you know, he gets thrown into slavery and he went lots of different places that he didn't plan on going. But in each place, as a slave and in prison, and even as Pharaoh's right-hand man, he focused on what needed to be done in that place. I don't think he was necessarily a 7, but it's an example of focusing on the present rather than letting the future consume you.
It can be a fixation on several solutions,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing which one to pick. Answers to a problem.
Right. And so this, you know, this is a kind of opposed to that is working. You know, the sense of there's a holiness and a spiritualness in the work that we do. And you were talking about the mundane tasks and those type of things. The things that 7s can tend to avoid, they need to include those and who they are too. And so the virtue for 7s is sobriety. Living a balanced life in the present involves taking in only as much as I need. You may remember that the passion for 7s is gluttony. You know, they want more experiences, more plans, more stuff, because they want to experience more. And a balanced life, sobriety, not just in a sense of not having alcohol, but just it's more of seeing the world as it is here. You know, it's taking only as much as I need, expending only as much as I need, not trying to gather, not trying to necessarily live the greatest experience of life. You know, and then that's fun. It's good to have good experiences in life, and it doesn't mean we need to stop having good experiences, but we can also see that, you know, life can be lived in a different way too, a more balanced way. Well, it is 9 o'clock, more or less.
Almost.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and finish here, and we'll come to type 8 next week,
And then,
do the rest of types as well.
all right, sounds good.
And remember, if you have any questions that you'd like to talk about next week, Lindsay gave me one, so if you have any others, let me know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys.